What's up, everybody? Welcome to part 2 of my review for this book here, Burmese Days by George Orwell, author of 1984 and Animal Farm. This is his first book that he ever wrote, talking about Burma, where he was born. So where we left off in the last video, we talked about these characters. James Flory, the main character, he's an Englishman who's really, he doesn't like living in Burma, but that's where he's stuck at in his life. And he's very lonely, so he's looking for someone to share his life with, and he's met this girl, Elizabeth. They've hit it off. He saved her from like a wild buffalo. But we also talked about these other characters like Yupo Kin, this very corrupt magistrate, and how he's trying to ruin the reputation of James Flory's friend, Dr. Swami. So picking off from where we left off in the last video, the corrupt magistrate, Yupo Kin, is talking with his wife about his plans to increase his power and to get rid of the people that stand in his way. And he comes up with this plan that he actually wants to start a rebellion in Burma. He actually wants to orchestrate a rebellion. And a lot of people would die in a rebellion like this, but he still wants to do it just to ruin the reputation of Dr. Swami. And his wife thinks this is like really messed up. She's like, people would die in a rebellion, but you want to start one just so you can blame it on Dr. Swami to ruin his reputation. And Yupo Kin is heartless. He's like, yep, I would do it all just to ruin this guy's reputation and get what I want out of the picture. Because remember, Dr. Swami isn't taking Yupo Kin's bribes, and that's why Yupo Kin wants Dr. Swami out of the picture, and to do that he needs to ruin his reputation. So moving on from there, the club that Flory is a part of, the European Social Club, they have this pressure put on them right now to put a native person into their club. And Dr. Swami really wants to get into the club, and Flory has taken it upon himself. He decides that he's going to try to do his friend a favor and actually put his name up as a nomination for a potential member of the club. And initially he was really scared to do this because of this backlash that he would receive from other members of the club, especially racist members like Ellis. But he kind of has this newfound strength ever since he met Elizabeth to kind of just do something that he would not initially have the courage to do. And in this case, he wants to help his friend Dr. Swami out and kind of like, nominate him as a potential member of the club. And he knows that he'll probably get a lot of backlash, but he still just wants to do it because he thinks it's the right thing to do. So anyway, going back to Flory's personal life, Flory is starting to bond with Elizabeth, and she likes hunting and he likes hunting, so he takes her shooting one day. And so they go hunting in the wild, and he tells her, he's like, don't get too excited, we might not catch anything very impressive. But it turns out that they actually find a leopard in the forest and they kill it. And so, Elizabeth is super happy because she really likes hunting. She wanted to find something like really impressive to kill, and they kill a leopard, and she's really happy, really excited. And this experience of hunting with Flory draws Flory and Elizabeth closer to one another. And, it's interesting because in this book, I did not like Elizabeth as a character. I felt like she sucks. She's terrible. The reason why I didn't like Elizabeth is, one, I mean, she's really, really racist. She looks down on all the native people. She thinks that they're, like, inferior to, like, white people. And so she has, like, this very just racist, very snobbish attitude about her. And you see someone like Flory, who's more down to earth, who's not racist, who thinks that the natives are on the same level with white people, but he still likes her. And I'm just kind of like knocking my head against the wall, like, bro, why do you like this racist girl? And I know it's like a different time back then. I mean, a lot of Europeans might have been a lot more racist back in this day and age, and so to him it was just kind of like, well, she's like a typical woman or a typical white person, I don't know. But in this case, I was just like, I wanted him to like see that she's not really worth it, that she's not that great a person, and for him to go ahead and do something better with his time than chasing this girl. But it's because Flory is so lonely that he's probably like, overlooking these negative characteristics, and he still wants to get with Elizabeth even though she's a snob and she's racist. So because Flory and Elizabeth are starting to bond with one another, Flory comes to the decision that he wants to propose to Elizabeth. So he sets up this plan, and he has her in this moment where he's going to propose. But just as he goes to propose, there's an earthquake, and the earthquake ends up like shaking and going, everything goes crazy. And because of that, it kind of ruins his opportunity to propose to Elizabeth. And then as the story would have it, right when his opportunity to propose to Elizabeth is ruined, there's this new Englishman that comes into the community or the village named Verrill. And Verrill is like a military man. He's got like this really nice horse. He's also like a huge like snob. He even looks down on like the Europeans at the club. It's not even that he just looks down on the natives, because all of the natives are looked down upon by the people at the European social club. But Verrill's an Englishman who looks down on most of the Europeans at the social club. So he's like a whole different level of like pretentious jerk. Elizabeth kind of starts to favor him because while she does like certain things about Florey, she does think that he's too friendly with the native people, that he's too open-minded with the native people, and she wants someone who's going to be more traditional and, think that they're superior to the natives, and that's how Verrill is. So she starts to actually gravitate towards Verrill, and this really upsets Florey. He gets like really depressed because now the girl that he really loves is interested in someone else. And he sees Verrill and Elizabeth going for rides on horseback together, and he gets like really jealous. And then, it talks about how like Florey, he likes to go on like these walks in nature. He likes to go admire nature. But when he goes for his walks and he's looking at nature, he begins to despise the forests and the birds and the flowers and all those things, because when he sees them, he just realizes he has no one to share them with since Elizabeth has left him for Verrill. And this gets him very depressed. And this, once again, taps into the loneliness he feels. He feels that, if I don't have someone that I can appreciate all this nature with, I'm going to be miserable. And, he kind of just sinks back into the despair that he was experiencing previous to meeting Elizabeth. He starts drinking again, he starts smoking more, he kind of just delves back into a lot of the negative habits. And then one night he goes, and after he gets back from his walk in the park, one of his servants has actually had it set up to where there's a hooker for him. So, he comes home, there's this hooker that's going to sleep with him, and then, he gets really drunk, he sleeps with this prostitute, but then after it's all said and done, he actually starts crying, showing that, he's trying to fill this emptiness, this loneliness with, casual sex and drinking and smoking, but it's not really doing the job. He still is miserable and lonely in his current predicament. So then one night when Florey goes to the social club with all of the other whites, the men at that club, they raise this, idea about electing another native into the club, and most of the members are all like, no, screw that, we're not going to do that, there's no need to do it. And one of the guys is like, the guy who's kind of heading the meeting, he's like, okay, well, if there's no one who thinks we should elect a member, then I'll just write back to like the headquarters and let them know that we're not going to get any new member, right? And so, but that's when Florey kind of stands up and says, no, I think we should vote in Dr. Swami. And the book talks about how it's really difficult. He's kind of like initially like scared to stand up and say that, but he goes beyond his fear. He goes beyond the intimidation of the other members who he knows would be very upset, and he voices his opinion and looks out for his friend, and he says, I think we should elect Dr. Swami to the club. And when he says that, a lot of the guys get really, really angry. Ellis especially, the racist guy, he gets really pissed off and, calls Florey a whole bunch of names. But Florey still stands strong and says we should vote him into the club. But around this time that Florey wants to vote Dr. Swami into the club, this rebellion that Yupo Kien wanted to happen, it starts, And because of that, one of the Englishmen named Maxwell, he does something that pisses off some of the native people, and some of the natives end up killing one of the club members, one of the white club members called Maxwell. So then the club members, they all find out that Maxwell has been killed, they find his body, and this pisses them off big time. So one day, Ellis, he's walking around, and he ends up getting into a fight with some natives, and he has a walking stick, and he actually hits one of the natives in the face and ends up blinding one of the native people he fights with. So because Ellis ends up blinding this one native guy, the natives get really upset, and they actually end up like marching in like a large group to the social club, and they are like outside and they're screaming to like bring Ellis outside and we won't hurt the rest of you, but all the Europeans, they stay inside and they're just trying to figure out what they're gonna do, because the natives are gonna they're starting to climb on top of the building and bang on the windows, and it looks like they're screwed. But then Flory finds out that he can use the stream nearby the club to if he jumps into the river, he can go out through the river and find the police and get them to come and stop the riot, or the attack by the natives on them. So that's what Flory does. He goes, he gets the police, and they come by and they dissolve the feud, and they get the natives to leave. So then, because of that, Flory is looked upon as a hero. All the people at the club who were pissed off and upset with Flory for wanting to vote Dr. Swami in the club, that all goes away. They have a deep admiration for Flory at this point. And because Dr. Swami is actually so close with Flory, his reputation also goes up. And this is counter to what Yupo Kyin wanted. Yupo Kyin was looking to ruin Dr. Swami's reputation. But because Flory is admired now, and because Dr. Swami is so close with Flory, Yupo Kyin has failed, and Dr. Swami's reputation is intact, and he's okay. Additionally, because things actually don't end up working out between this guy Verrill and Elizabeth, once Flory is admired, Elizabeth, things with Elizabeth start to work out again, and they start to, she's very impressed that Flory was able to dissolve that negative situation and save them all. So she starts to admire him a lot more, and because of that, things start working out with them again, and Flory has these plans to propose and to make it work. And one day they actually go to church and they're all hanging out, and Flory has these visions of man, it's gonna be so good when I marry her, and we'll start a family and life will be great, But Yupo Kyin, when he finds out that Dr. Swami's reputation is intact because of Flory, he comes up with an idea. And his idea is that Flory has this previous mistress, right? He has this woman, her last name is May. She has a Hola May or something like that in the book. And this mistress, she's super upset with Flory because Flory basically kicked her out of his life when he met Elizabeth. And because she's been kicked out of Flory's life, she's been really struggling with money and lifestyle because Flory's not supporting her anymore. So Yupo Kyin basically pays this woman to make a huge scene, because if Flory, is found that he's been sleeping with a native, it's going to bring his reputation down big time. And so they're in the middle of this church service when all of a sudden this woman that Flory had slept with, she bursts into the church and she starts screaming give me the money, and she just makes this huge scene, and it makes Flory look terrible. And the woman's appearance is really bad. She's not presentable physically at all. She looks really bad, so that Elizabeth and a lot of other people see her and they're oh my gosh, and it just doesn't look good for Flory at all, and his reputation automatically takes a really negative turn. So then Flory kind of goes chasing after Elizabeth, hey, don't worry about her, I love you, will you marry me? And he proposes, but she says no, she never wants to talk to him again, and it basically ruins everything that Flory had hoped to attain with Elizabeth, that he felt it was so close to accomplishing his goal that he could, fulfill his desires and, get rid of the loneliness in his life, and everything was going to be good once he married Elizabeth. But now, because of Yupo Kyin and because of that whole scene, his reputation is now ruined, and everything that he wanted to have with Elizabeth is ruined. And this really upsets him emotionally. And because he knows he's going to be back to a life of loneliness where all he does is drink and smoke, and now he can't even appreciate nature because he's alone, he has no one to appreciate it with, he knows that he's going to be hating his life in Burma. All he's going to do is get to hang out with the same racist and ignorant people at this European club. All he's going to get to do is just drink his life away, and he doesn't want to live like that. So he makes the decision that he needs to kill himself. And this was the part of the book that blew my mind, and I was no way, I can't believe this just happened. The worst part of the whole book to me, and the part about the ending that tore me up, was he has his dog. his little dog that like follows him throughout the book. And you know, before he kills himself, before he decides to shoot himself, he goes to his house with the intention of, I gotta kill myself now, I'm gonna commit suicide, I don't want to live anymore. And he thinks to himself, well, like, who's gonna take care of my dog? And because of that, he brings his dog inside and he ends up shooting his dog. And then he ends up shooting himself, and Flory, the main character in this book, commits suicide. And I was just like, why would you kill the dog? Like, just have someone else look after it. Just have someone else take care of it. Like, you know, someone else will eventually potentially take care of you didn't have to kill it, you know, which that was the part of the book that pissed me off the most. I mean, I was upset that Flory took his own life too, but why'd you have to kill the innocent dog? That's not cool, man. Don't do that. But anyway, so yes, so after Flory ends up shooting himself in his chest, you know, his servants hear the gunshots and they come running into the room and they find him and his dead dog, and they send for Dr. Veeraswamy. So then Dr. Veeraswamy shows up, and he's like so upset that his friend Flory has killed himself. And long story short, Dr. Veeraswamy, he ends up, you know, because Flory's reputation is destroyed, Dr. Veeraswamy's reputation is destroyed. And this book basically just ends in a very tragic way, for the most part. The way that it ends is Dr. Veeraswamy, his life kind of goes down the drain. His career kind of takes a very negative turn, and his life ends up for the worst. Yupo Kien, the really corrupt magistrate who ruined Flory's reputation with that girl in the church, who set up the rebellion just to ruin Dr. Veeraswamy's reputation. He actually ends up becoming a member of the club. He ends up living this life where he's loved, but he ends up dying from, like, I think, like, some medical condition. He ends up, like, dying due to health-related reasons. So, and the very big part of this story for Yupo Kien is throughout this entire book, he does all of these really screwed up things, and he always, it's always mentioned that his intention is, when he eventually reaches the place in the world that he wants to reach, he's going to build lots of things, I think, like, lots of temples, like religious temples, as a way to kind of get his, like, karma in the right place, so that ultimately when he builds these religious temples, the good of that will outweigh his bad deeds. But the thing is he actually ends up dying before he can do that. So according to, like, the religious outlook, he ends up dying before he can actually do the good things that would, you know, balance out all the wicked things he's done. So, like, according to this, he would go to, like, the hell, or, like, the negative, like, underworld of his afterlife beliefs. And then the story kind of ends bad for everybody. The only person that it actually ends pretty good for is Elizabeth, because then she moves back to another country, and she gets out of Burma, and her life kind of takes a good positive turn. So I was surprised, because overall I liked this book. I'm surprised because there weren't a lot of likable characters in this novel. Like I said, Yupo Kien is a bad character. Elizabeth is a bad character. The only character that I liked overall was Flory. Even though I think he made some bad decisions, I felt like I could at least feel for him. He was lonely. He, you know, he wanted a better life for himself, but ultimately I was very upset with his final decision to commit suicide and to kill his dog on top of that. At the end of this book, George Orwell kind of talks about how suicide has been a problem for Englishmen in Burma. And, you know, once again, this is where George Orwell was born, or spent a lot of his time in his early childhood. So, you know, for him, I guess he was trying to touch upon, like, a social issue of that time in Burma, which is suicide from the English people that are, like, living in there, kind of showing that life for those people was not very good. Maybe it was because they could feel the guilt of being colonizers. Maybe it's because they knew they weren't at home. For whatever reason, I guess despite the tragic end of this book, Flory represents what happened to a lot of Englishmen around that time period when the British were colonizing India and places like Burma. It shows you know, the social reality behind a lot of these people ended up committing suicide. And Florey's story is kind of an expression or a way to show you what that looked like in a novel, what that looks like in this book. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed these videos with me talking about this book. If you're a fan of George Orwell, let me know in the comments section. If you liked this book, if you didn't like this book, let me know in the comments section. If there's another George Orwell book that you think I should read, let me know. I'll definitely want to read more of his books in the future. So if you have not subscribed to this channel, hit the subscribe button. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up. Anyway, that's it for this video. I'll see you guys next time. Bye.